So let me ask you a question. What is the one and only thing that we can absolutely count on in this world? What? Taxes? Sorry. Change. Yes, change. Absolutely. We can always count on the fact that things are going to change in our lives. And what's interesting, what's interesting is that those of us living today will experience more change in just a few years than our ancestors did in their entire lives. And part of that is because, well, we're living longer. But most of it is because life is just a little more complicated. and we have a lot of choice, don't we? We have a lot of choice. We're free to choose different places to live, different jobs, different careers, different spouses, different religions. We can choose a different church. We can choose a different way of thinking, a different way of being. You know, we can choose a different gender if the one we were assigned at birth does not match who we feel that we are. So change is good. But change is also very stressful, if you might have noticed. So I happen to know a lot of people that seem to be going through some kind of transition these days. Either transitioning in location, moving to a different place to live, transitioning careers, transitioning from working life to retirement, transitioning from full-time parenting to empty nesters, transitioning from a single a couple to a family, huge transition. And again, changing spiritual community, changing social groups. A lot of change. And you think of our ancestors, and most of them, for the most part, lived in the same place their entire lives, doing the same things for their entire lives. The women were always raising children and taking care of the domestic duties, and men were working at the same trade that their fathers worked at, and their fathers before them, and their fathers before them. You know, not a lot. They worshiped the same God. They weren't apt to change religions. They ate the same kinds of food. It's not like they could go down the street to the local Chinese food place and then try the Italian place across the street. You know, it's what they ate, what was grown, and what, they cooked, and what, they had available to them. The only transition that they saw were the ones that were thrust upon them, like famine or war or persecution, or which caused migration, or loss of a loved one, And some of the changes that happen to us, we don't choose either, right? A lot of the things that happen to us, we don't choose. Maybe a termination of a job, or a diagnosis, a life-changing diagnosis, or a natural disaster, which seems to be happening with increasing frequency these days, or loss of a loved one, And we don't like that kind of change. We want that kind of change. We want things to stay as they always have been. Must be something in our DNA, because that unfamiliar territory is scary. But if we can move through it consciously, if we can move through that transition consciously and with a lot of loving support, that transition can become a transformation. It can lead us to transformation and to the expression of our wholeness. And so whether, it's a change in our lives that we chose or it chose us, there is something within us that is seeking to emerge. We are ever evolving beings, and we must change. And whether that's, we do it, we choose it, or it's thrust upon us, it's going to happen in our life, right? And how do we react to it? It's our choice, really, to how to react to it. We can resist it. No, not look at it. Rail against the universe. We can pretend that it doesn't affect us. I see that a lot in spiritual community. I see it in myself. Oh no, it's all good. No, it's all good. Is it? Sometimes, maybe not. And so we can either choose that, or we can choose to get the most out of it, to milk it for all it's worth, to use it to grow and to evolve and to allow a more expansive sense of ourselves. And there's a movement today, a definite movement in that direction of facing transition consciously and allowing for the emergence of a healed, whole, higher self, to allow that to emerge. I mean, just look at the two largest transitions that we'll ever experience in this lifetime: birth and death. And we're approaching both of those with more awareness, more consciousness. Think about the way that our parents or our grandparents, when they were giving birth. Most women were just knocked unconscious. I know my mom was when she gave birth to me in a hospital. And, then the baby is born, and you may hold that baby briefly for a while, and then it's wrapped in a blanket, given a bottle, put in a bassinet, and taken to the nursery to be put on display for the fathers to come and gaze at their child from behind this, glass partition, right? Yeah, can you imagine? Now, today, they're birthing centers. And women do this consciously, breathing through, a lot of breathing through, and usually they work with a doula that they have been working with for a while. And when the baby's born, it's put directly on a mother's chest and skin to skin, and allowed to, find its way, to the milking center and nurse and stay there for as long as needed. So it's a positive, conscious process now. That's changing. So on the other end of the spectrum, we have death, right? Used to be we didn't talk about death. Nobody had an advance directive. Usually the loved ones didn't really know what that person would have wanted. They had to guess. I think hospice is a relatively new thing. Used to be people would just die in a hospital bed or maybe sent home, and the family is just like completely ill-equipped to know what to do. But now there's a conscious dying movement. Has anybody ever read any of the Stephen Levine material? Yeah, it's really good stuff. Stephen Levine, he kind of started this conscious dying movement. And wishes are expressed beforehand. Hospice is this beautiful, gentle, loving experience where truly angels, angel workers are guiding that person and caring for that person. So this biggest transition that we will have in our lifetime, from the physical realm into the spiritual realm, is eased into with as much love and grace and heart as possible. And, even the grieving process is becoming more conscious, and not just grieving loss of a loved one, but grieving any kind of loss. We don't look at it anymore as this, horrible thing that the person has to endure, but grief is a process of healing where there's a lot of support. There's a tremendous support available for people who are in that process of grieving. So Robert Brummett, who wrote this book, Finding Yourself in Transition, oh, you know that one. Yeah. Using Life's Changes for Spiritual Awakening. He's a Unity minister, been around for a while, written a few books, some really good stuff. So he says, here it is. Grief is not just a symptom of being wounded, but is a part of the very process by which we are healed. Grieving our loss is a major step in coming home to our true self. And so I am personally going through a process of grieving, having lost both of my siblings this year. And I'm trying to do it consciously, But if I'm honest, a lot of times I find that I'm more comfortable being really busy so that I don't have to think and experience the pain of that tremendous loss, But I'm learning, and the wisdom in this book is really helping me to slow it down, face it more consciously, and mine it for the gold that is buried in there. And there is. It's buried, but there's gold in there, and I'm beginning to see it. In every experience, right? Every experience. There's gold in there. Sometimes we have to mine it to find it. And it's a process we want to do consciously as possible, and get support around, And there are markers along the path that can help assist us in this journey of whatever kind of transition that we're going through. And let's face it, everything has an ending, right? Everything has a beginning, everything has an ending. Even those things that we're celebrating, that are a new beginning, that are wonderful, a new wonderful job, maybe, is a great thing to look forward to. And what's also true is that there's something you left behind. You may have learned a lot at the job you had before, or maybe made friends that you're leaving behind. If you're moving to a new city, that's an exciting time, new possibilities, a new home, a new life you're creating. Also leaving behind, your friends, maybe some family, things that you did in that place. You're leaving that behind. If you're getting divorced, that's usually an incredibly painful time. And some people are looking forward to being single again or being with somebody else, but you are leaving behind a life you created with that person, and what you did together and all of that. And I think sometimes we jump too quickly to, it's in the past, let it go. Look to the future. Look to the new possibilities. Yeah, and there's some truth to that. But by honoring the endings, that begins the process of conscious transition. That can really help us to integrate the lessons, embody the blessings in that experience, because I don't care what it is, whatever that experience was, there were blessings in that experience. It helps us embody that and helps us to grow into a more expansive sense of self, more of our wholeness, right? With that. So Brummett says in the book that all transitions have a pattern, a similar pattern, and they contain 3 distinct stages. And that's endings, the endings. The second stage is the void. And the third is new beginnings. And he says this kind of parallels the ancient, and eternal rite of passage rituals, right? And so that first part, that first stage is kind of what I've been talking about the last few minutes, the endings. So again, to get the most out of this stage, we want to honor what we left behind. And you might want to make a list of all of the things that you learned from that previous experience, or all of the ways that you were blessed, all of the blessings that were in that experience, all of the ways that you grew. Just that in itself helps to integrate that, and it's very healing. So the second stage, we're ready for the second stage, is the void. We're stepping into the void. This is wandering in the wilderness stage, that wandering in the wilderness. That is metaphorically represented by many stories in the Bible, including Moses leading the Jews wandering through the wilderness for 40 years before being able to enter the promised land. Jesus, going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to face the devil, or we might call that the shadow self. Isn't that what he was really doing? Facing the shadow self. And it's interesting, this number 40 is mentioned 159 times in the Bible. So there's something significant there. And the significance, I did some research on this, and what really felt true for me is that 40 it's not the number. It's not the number of years or days. It's that time that it takes to go through whatever you need to go through to create a solid foundation. So you think about the 4 corners of a foundation. I think that's a good way to think about this. You're creating a solid foundation on which to grow. And sometimes this void stage can be really disorienting. Like literally you don't know where you are. It's all unfamiliar. And there is you're shifting from one, the way that you always saw yourself, the way you always identified yourself is shifting, but you don't quite know what yet, right? There's some emptiness here, and maybe an experience of emptiness, which is a good thing, as you'll learn in a minute, because you're creating that solid foundation from which good things grow. Also, you might experience disenchantment with life. Ever had that experience? Like totally what you had valued so tenaciously before, what you thought was true was suddenly upended. And what you thought was so important, so valuable, is now feels like, what? Like a dream. I had this experience once in my life when I was really going for I was working at Hollywood Pictures in motion picture development, and I wanted to be a creative executive. I was working for some creative executives, and I wanted to do that. That was my dream, and I was working hard, and I was climbing the corporate ladder and doing everything I needed to do to get there. Like, I wanted to do that. I want to be a creative executive. And at that time, my mom had cancer. And it was kind of a long, drawn-out process, and I was the one that really was there to take care of her, and it was my total pleasure. My mom was my heart, so I was there, every moment. And at that time, going through this process and seeing life, and the value of every day, I got to this point of disenchantment. And I was like, why? What? Why did I even think that was something I wanted? And it was just like, it was suddenly not important. I was like, why did I even, but I didn't know. So that left, and then I thought, well, what do I want to do? I don't know. I don't know who I want to be. I don't know what I want to do and what I want to give. And it took a while. And then after my mother passed, after a little bit of time and some of the inheritance that I received, I produced a video that was designed to assist caregivers for people who were dying of cancer, called Transcending Cancer. That was important. That felt like, okay, this is what I meant to do in this moment. And that's what I did. So, you think about the word disenchantment. It's interesting because the word enchantment is in there. And enchantment means, you're under a spell. You're kind of under a spell. And we all are under a spell in this world, in this society, right? Society has a way of, we know what makes you happy. You go to the right school, you get the right job, you marry the right person, you have the right number of kids, you have enough money, you drive the right car, you join the right country club. I don't know. That's real popular in our neighborhood. You do all the things that you're supposed to do, and that makes you happy. But if and when you get there, it's like, oh, wait a second, I did everything I was supposed to do. Why aren't I happy? And boom, the spell is broken. You're disenchanted. So this is a really good place to be, because this is the space where your soul can really grow. You're laying the foundation. You're laying the foundation here for the emergence of that whole, healed, higher self. So in the book, he quotes this Chinese poet, Wu Mingfu. Just gonna take a little sip of water here. I think we all need a sip of water. And he writes, the seed that is to grow must lose itself as a seed, and they that creep may graduate through chrysalis to wings. Wilt thou then, O mortal, cling to husks which falsely seem to you the self? We must throw off the husks of our previous self in order to blossom into that higher expression, the expression of our wholeness. And that's what this whole process of conscious transition can give us. When we do this consciously, it can give us, we're laying the groundwork here. This is a sacred time. It's a very sacred time. It's scary, but it's sacred. And you look at those two words together, and you change around a couple of the the letters, and you got scary and sacred. Scary and sacred, too. It's sacred because this is where the real birth of the soul happens, and the growth. And that wholeness becomes revealed. And now we're ready for step 3, which is new beginnings. This is the new life that we can step into. We're reborn. We're stepping into a new experience with more wisdom, more strength, more perspective, a different perspective of life, of ourselves, of the world. We're stepping in with that, and then we can give that. We can share that with the world. And that is where I'm going to end now, because I'm going to continue with that next week. Okay, namaste.